You stand above the Tiber at dawn in 117 AD, while Rome brightens under Trajan's rule. Mist drifts over the river, and first light paints roofs, temples, warehouses, and wet stone. Stay with us for 14 minutes as imperial Rome unfolds street by street before you. You will see its forums, baths, shrines, markets, homes, and the systems that feed it. Few cities on Earth feel larger, louder, richer, or more certain of their destiny. Barges knock softly below, and bakers already lift warm loaves into the waking streets. The air smells of ash, damp clay, olive oil, river mud, and bread split fresh at dawn. Sandals scrape the paving, mule bells answer, and voices rise from alleys still half dark. Rome is awake before sunrise because power here begins with movement, not silence. Every street ahead carries soldiers, slaves, merchants, petitioners, priests, and rumor. You cross the riverbank where mooring posts, ropes, jars, and stacked crates crowd the quay. Porters bend beneath sacks of grain, while scribes mark deliveries on wax with quick hands. Here the Tiber looks less beautiful than necessary, thick with labor, noise, and delay. Rome depends on what arrives by water as surely as on what it commands by law each day. African grain, Spanish oil, wine, fish sauce, marble, timber, and news all pass this way. Take away the river traffic, and even Rome's marble grandeur would begin to starve fast. Following the crowd inland, you enter streets that tighten, twist, and begin to echo. Shops open straight onto the road, each one a narrow world of tools, goods, and voices. A cobbler trims leather by his threshold, while a bronze worker hammers in steady bursts. Bundles of wool hang from beams, and dyed cloth glows red, saffron, green, and deep blue. Vendors call prices before buyers slow, because hesitation here is already a negotiation. Children dart between adults with errands, wax tablets, crusts of bread, and bold excuses. A barber shaves a client in the open air as gossip travels faster than any cart. Above the shops rise rented rooms, stacked high over a street that never truly rests. This is how Rome breathes between monuments, through trade, noise, rent, and crowded labor. The paving widens ahead, and suddenly the city begins to stage its power in marble. You enter Trajan's Forum, still astonishingly new, inaugurated only 5 years earlier. Its vast court and colonnades turn even ordinary footsteps into part of a ceremony. Marble throws back the morning light so fiercely that faces narrow and eyes seek shade. Officials cross the square with tablets and attendants moving close behind their shoulders. Petitioners wait beneath porticos, hoping a seal, a favor, or a name will appear. Victory here has been fixed in stone, ordered into space, and polished for public awe. Rome wants every visitor to feel that empire is rational, permanent, and deserved. Standing here, you sense why power in Rome is meant to be seen before it is heard. At the Forum's heart rises Trajan's column, its spiral relief climbing like frozen memory. Campaigns in Dacia wrap the shaft in carved motion, marching upward toward the sky. People stop below and look up, reading conquest in images more readily than in words. The monument does not merely commemorate victory, it teaches Rome how to remember it. At the Forum's edge, the markets of Trajan climb the slope in layered brick terraces. Vaulted corridors step upward through the hill, turning the landscape into architecture. Clerks, messengers, merchants, and buyers move beneath arches still sharp with newness. You smell lamp oil, leather, spice, papyrus, dust, and goods unpacked before sunrise. Voices bounce from the brickwork, so every bargain sounds louder than it truly is. Nothing about this complex feels accidental. Commerce here has been carefully engineered. Even shopping in Rome can feel supervised by the same state that commands legions. The empire gathers wealth abroad, and places like this sort it into daily transactions. Turn away from the new marble, and the older city closes around you almost at once. The streets narrow, the light breaks apart, and upper stories lean toward each other. Laundry hangs from windows, and balconies almost seem to whisper across the narrow gap. The smell here sharpens into fish brine, onions, urine, smoke, damp mortar, and stew. At a corner shrine, a passerby pauses for one quick prayer before moving on again. A woman argues over lamp oil, a porter shoulders grain, and a mule refuses a turn. From upper floors come lullabies, coughing, arguments, and stools dragged over wood. This is not the Rome of speeches and triumphs, but of rent, heat, and ordinary survival. The city is richest where it is most crowded, because every wall here earns its keep. Looking up, you see how Rome stacks private lives directly above the public street. Soon the space opens again, and older civic Rome unfolds in stone, memory, and ritual. Here, temples, basilicas, and speaking platforms still carry the weight of the Republic. Magistrates and advocates move through the district as if history still breathes here. Men in bordered togas pause beneath columns while assistants shadow them with documents. At one end, priests prepare offerings. At another, litigants rehearse in low, hard tones. Pigeons burst from cornices when the crowd shifts fast, or a cart clips old stone. Nothing in this quarter belongs to one moment alone. Centuries overlap in every step. The newer forums speak with imperial confidence, but here older civic accents remain. Climbing toward the Capitol line, you feel the streets grow steeper and more ceremonial. From its height, temples dominate the view, and the city briefly feels arranged by gods. The great temple of Jupiter crowns the hill with authority older than the emperors. Priests in white move through incense smoke, while supplicants carry flowers and cakes. Bronze fittings catch the sun, and sacrificial animals stamp uneasily against the paving. Religion here is not private comfort alone. It is public order wrapped in ritual. From this hill, Rome seems held together by vows, processions, and inherited favor. Yet below the sacred calm, traffic still grinds on, impatient and entirely earthly. That contrast defines the city, heaven in its temples, friction in every street. Descending again, you feel water re-enter the soundscape before you ever see its source. By this age, aqueducts feed baths, fountains, and households across the capital. Public basins spill constantly, and people gather there with jars, gossip, and complaints. Children splash their hands while slaves wait with vessels balanced against tired legs. Water flashes in channels, murmurs in courtyards, and disappears under worn paving. Rome treats abundance as spectacle, letting utility advertise the reach of empire. You hear that confidence in every basin, drain, fountain, cistern, and hidden pipe. In this city, power is not only seen in marble, it is heard in ceaseless running water. A bath complex draws you next, its entrance busy with men arriving through warm steam. Inside, wet stone shines underfoot, and voices soften into a constant, humid murmur. Friends oil their skin, scrape it clean, and trade rumors between hot and cooler rooms. Attendants carry towels, sandals, and metal strigils with efficient, practiced motions. Light falls from high openings and catches vapor drifting like pale cloth in motion. The baths are social theaters as much as places to clean the body after labor and dust. Deals begin here, alliances strengthen here, and gossip spreads faster in the heat. Even a stranger can sense that Roman public life depends on such shared interiors. Outside, the streets compete and collide. In here, the city steams, listens, and negotiates. The crowd thickens as you move toward avenues of entertainment and public excitement. Vendors weave through the press with snacks, watered wine, garlands, and lucky charms. A boy chants racing colors with fierce seriousness, as if he were naming rival gods. Actors and musicians gather circles of listeners wherever an open patch can be found. Rome works hard, yet it also watches, bets, cheers, and remembers what it has seen. Public life here is never private for long. Every crowd can become an audience at once. Faces turn at raised voices, sudden laughter, or any whisper of scandal drifting nearby. The city feeds on attention almost as eagerly as it feeds on grain from the provinces. To walk through Rome is to enter a place where spectatorship becomes daily habit. You turn into a residential quarter where wealth and hardship stand door beside door. One entrance opens to painted walls, an inner court, and the measured quiet of status. The next leads to a steep stair where tenants climb toward dim upper rooms by habit. A cook tends lentils in one doorway, while a tutor drills letters beside the lane. An old man sits outside for air, wrapped in a cloak despite the afternoon warmth. From another room comes the smell of cabbage, garlic, and fish browning slowly in oil. Household shrines hold tiny flames, flowers, and the stubborn hope of family protection. In these lanes, Rome feels intimate, improvised, and endlessly adjusted to necessity. Empires are governed in palaces, but they are lived in kitchens, stairs, and walls. Now you climb toward the Palatine, where access tightens and guards stand straighter. Doorways grow larger, courtyards quieter, and movement more deliberate with every step. Behind walls lie imperial residences, offices, gardens, servants, and controlled approach. Messengers slip through entrances carrying sealed letters, folded cloth, and urgent news. Fountains murmur in enclosed courts where the noise of lower Rome arrives, softened. From these heights, the city below looks ordered, almost manageable, almost obedient. But the illusion breaks whenever the wind brings back markets, wheels, and shouting. Even emperors rule Rome from within its noise, and never fully above it for long. The hill grants distance, not silence, because the capital cannot truly be hushed. Following the slope down again, you rejoin the streets where supply keeps power alive. Storehouses crowd the lower roads, and carts unload jars, baskets, timber, and amphorae. Scribes check seals, tally cargo, and argue over quantities before witnesses drift away. Every crate here represents roads, taxes, contracts, weather, ships, and imperial risk. A delayed convoy means hunger somewhere. A spoiled shipment means losses across many hands. Rome feels less eternal in these streets than its monuments would ever care to admit. Take away the flow of goods, and confidence quickly becomes anxiety dressed in stone. That is why ports matter as much as palaces, even if poets celebrate them far less. Smoke lifts above the roofs, and the western light turns brick, plaster, and marble gold. The city looks softer now, but its machinery still turns beneath the calmer light. Tomorrow these same lanes will wake before dawn, and begin again without hesitation. You leave the dense center and move toward roads where gardens, tombs, and open ground begin. Traffic thins, and the city releases itself into air, stone dust, and wider horizons. Aqueduct lines stride across the distance like measured strokes against the evening sky. What seemed invisible downtown becomes obvious here. Rome is engineered to endure. Farm carts roll inward with late produce, while others carry ash and refuse outward. Roadside tombs remind each traveler that memory in Rome is built beside movement. The air smells cleaner here, touched by grass, stone dust, and the cooling breath of dusk. Behind you, the city still roars, but now it roars from afar like restless surf. From this edge, Rome seems less a maze than a giant machine of roads, walls, and water. Every arch, channel, wall, and street belongs to a system larger than any ruler. Climb one final rise at sunset, and the whole capital opens beneath a bronze sky. Temples catch the last light, smoke drifts upward, and the Tiber darkens into shadow. The forums gleam pale, the markets step along the slope, and roofs ripple to the horizon. Somewhere below, water still runs through fountains, baths, kitchens, and hidden conduits. Somewhere below, clerks still count grain, cooks still stir pots, and gamblers still argue. The people living this evening do not know the future waiting beyond their empire. They do not know which monuments will break, which roads will fade, or which names endure. For them, Rome feels complete, supplied, and unshakably central to the known world. That certainty is part of the beauty and part of the tragedy within this wide view. Every great city believes for a while that its present form will last forever. This is Trajan's Rome in 117 AD, ordered by power, fed by water, and ruled by motion. A city of forums and tenements, bath steam and river mud, marble pride and human noise. It gathers provinces into markets, channels mountains into fountains, and turns crowds to history. Seen from afar, it is empire made visible. Walked on foot, it is labor made daily. That is what makes Rome unforgettable. It feels monumental because it never stops working. Night gathers slowly, lamps appear, and the capital begins to glow instead of blaze. Yet, even in the dark, you can sense the engines of the city still turning below. Tomorrow the carts will return, the fountains will run, and the markets will fill again. Rome endures here not as a ruin, but as a living system still certain of its destiny. And for one long evening in 117 AD, you have walked through the center of that belief.